They thought when they locked me up they were ending something, that they were silencing a threat, that putting me behind bars meant the streets would be safe again. They didn't know they weren't ending anything. They were just beginning something they couldn't stop. You see, prison didn't kill Malcolm. Prison birthed Malcolm. I wasn't a man when I went in. I was a product of the streets. I was slick. I was loud. I was angry. I was running, but I didn't even know from what. Chasing pleasure, chasing money, chasing a name, running on fumes with no direction. I was called Detroit Red then. That was me. Sharp suits, zoot hats, fancy talk, fast women, gambling tables, reefer smoke. A mirror of the madness I was born into. A reflection of what America told a young black man he had to become to matter. I was 20 years old when they slammed that cold iron gate behind me. 8 to 10 years in Charlestown State Prison. For burglary, for theft, for trying to survive in a system that left men like me with no other options but the underground. You think I was the first black man to end up behind bars for doing what this society trained me to do? No, I was just another number to them. Just another black face with a criminal record. Another inmate to warehouse, another soul to discard. But that concrete cell was where I met my mirror. And when I looked in it, I didn't see a gangster. I saw a ghost. I saw a man who didn't know who he was, didn't know his history, didn't know his power. That realization was the beginning. It started slow. A whisper in the dark. I began reading, at first just to pass time, then to understand time. I read because the world had lied to me. It told me I was nothing, and I wanted to find out for myself whether that was true. I picked up a dictionary, not a novel, not a newspaper, a dictionary. I copied every word on every page, from A to Z. Do you know how long it takes to write down every single word in the dictionary by hand? But I did it, because I was tired of not understanding what was being said. I was tired of not having the words to fight back. I was tired of being mute in a world where language was the weapon used to keep us down. Every word I copied was a brick in the foundation of a new man, a man who would speak with clarity, a man who would use truth as a sword, a man who would never again be mentally imprisoned. Then came the books. Books about history, books about philosophy, books about religion, about Africa, about America, about liberation. I read about the white man's lies and the black man's suffering. I read about empires built on chains, about blood-stained flags waving over graves of people who looked like me. I read about revolutions. I read about people who refused to be broken. And with every page, I felt my spine straighten. I felt my eyes open. I felt my old self dying. Then came the letters. My brothers and sisters wrote to me from the outside. And among those letters came words about a man named Elijah Muhammad. At first, I was skeptical. I was still too deep in the world. But as I began to understand his teachings, something clicked. He said the black man is the original man. He said our names had been stolen, our history erased, our culture buried, that Islam was our true religion, that the white man had tricked us into hating ourselves, that he had given us his name, his religion, his image, and used it to enslave our minds. That truth lit a fire in me. I wrote to Mr. Muhammad. I studied the teachings of the Nation of Islam. I stopped eating pork. I stopped smoking. I stopped cursing. I stopped being a prisoner and started being a student. My cell became my classroom. My books became my teachers. My mind became my weapon. I prayed. I fasted. I focused. While other men were counting down their sentences, I was counting up my knowledge. I realized prison wasn't a cage. It was a forge. And I was being remade. I wasn't Malcolm Little anymore. That name had been given to my grandfather by a slave master. I didn't know my true name. So I took the X, not as a symbol of mystery, but as a scar. A reminder of what had been stolen. A reminder that my history had been burned, and I carried the ashes in that single letter. Malcolm X, that was the name I chose, and in choosing it I claimed my freedom. Most men go into prison and come out worse. But prison saved my life, not because of the guards, not because of the warden, not because of the system, because when I was finally left alone with myself, I had nowhere to hide. And in that silence, I found something louder than any street corner, any nightclub, any gang. I found purpose. I found conviction. I found truth. They thought prison would bury me, but they didn't know I was a seed. And the darkness didn't kill me, it made me grow, certainly. Here's Keynote No. 2 is fully expanded into 900 words in the voice and style of Malcolm X documentary tone, without any headings or ending sentences. When you take a man's name, when you take his language, when you strip him of his God, when you erase his history, you don't need chains to keep him enslaved. All you need is ignorance. I didn't realize that when I first stepped into that prison yard. I thought I was tough. I thought I was wise. I thought I knew how the world worked because I'd seen it from the gutter. I thought surviving on the streets made me a man. But it took a prison cell to show me just how little I knew. It took isolation to show me how deep the deception ran. And it took books to show me what power really looked like. You want to know what changed the course of my life while I was locked up? It wasn't a riot. It wasn't a sermon. It wasn't some program they offered me in the prison library. It was words written by dead men, by thinkers, by warriors, by truth tellers. It was knowledge, it was study, it was discipline. I didn't start by trying to become an intellectual. I just wanted to understand what was being said around me. I wanted to write letters that didn't sound foolish. I wanted to read a book without stumbling over every third word. So I went to the root. I picked up a dictionary. That's where it began. I wrote every single word from that dictionary down by hand, page after page, word after word. I didn't skip. I didn't rush. I wrote them until I remembered them, until I could pronounce them, until I could use them, until I had them tattooed in my brain. The dictionary became my Bible, my Quran, my scroll. Because I knew if I could conquer language, I could conquer thought. And if I could conquer thought, I could never be enslaved again. Do you know what it means to know the meaning of every word you speak? It means no one can confuse you. It means no one can manipulate you. It means you own your mind. That was just the beginning. Once I got a taste for knowledge, I couldn't stop. I read all night under that dim prison light. Sometimes I would read until the guards had to make me go to sleep. And when they shut the lights off, I kept reading in my head, recalling what I had just learned. I read about world history. I read about Africa before slavery. I read about the Black Kingdoms, about Nubia, about Egypt, about Ethiopia. I read about our scientists, our poets, our kings, our warriors. I found out we weren't always slaves. We were mathematicians, builders, philosophers, masters of medicine. I read that while Europe was crawling through its dark ages, black civilizations were shining with culture and brilliance. And I started to ask myself, why didn't I know this? Why wasn't I taught this? Who benefits from me being kept in the dark? I read about slavery, not the sugar-coated version they give you in school. I read the raw truth. I read about the ships, about the chains, about the lashes, about how they raped our women, how they sold our children, how they bred us like cattle, how they forced us to carry their names, speak their language, believe in their image of God, how they broke our backs and then tried to break our minds. And then I realized this wasn't just history. This was war, a war that never ended, a war against our memory, a war against our dignity, a war against our very being. And knowledge was the weapon they were most afraid we'd discover. In that prison cell, I studied the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. He told us that the white man is the devil not because of the color of his skin, but because of the evil he has done. Because he has murdered, lied, stolen, enslaved, and then blamed the victim for his own condition. Because he has rewritten history to make the oppressor look like the hero. And when I looked around me, when I looked at the conditions of my people, our neighborhoods, our schools, our prisons, I saw exactly what Mr. Muhammad was talking about. I saw a system designed to keep us sick, divided, addicted, and afraid. And I knew that the only antidote was knowledge of self. So I kept reading. I read about Marcus Garvey. I read about Nat Turner. I read about Frederick Douglass. I read about Toussaint Louverture. These were men who didn't just accept the world as it was. They saw the truth, and they rose up. And I wanted to rise too. I wanted to be more than a statistic, more than a convict, more than a colored boy with a criminal record. I wanted to stand upright. I wanted to speak truth with fire in my chest. I wanted to walk into a room and not have to bow my head to anyone. Not because of pride, but because of dignity. Books gave me that. Books gave me that fire, that clarity, that sense of purpose. I wasn't learning just for myself. I was preparing for war, a mental war, a spiritual war, a war for the liberation of my people. When you understand who you are, where you come from, what has been done to you, and what you are capable of, you become dangerous to the structure that feeds on your ignorance. I was determined to become that danger. In prison, I saw brothers wasting time playing cards, lifting weights, talking nonsense. I didn't judge them. I understood. They hadn't been shown the truth yet. But I knew that if I wanted to make it out, not just physically, but mentally free, I had to use every minute wisely. Every word I learned was a step toward freedom. Every book I finished was a strike against the chains. I studied grammar. I studied Latin roots. I studied the Quran. I studied the Bible. I studied politics. I studied the law. I wanted to understand every angle of the system that had built the walls around me. Because once you understand the system, you can dismantle it. When I entered that prison, I wasn't thinking about liberation. I wasn't thinking about black pride. I wasn't thinking about Islam or Elijah Muhammad or Africa or power. I was thinking about survival. I was thinking about myself. I was thinking about Detroit red, sharp suits, shiny shoes, numbers running, hustling, conning, living fast and dying slow. I was thinking about the only life I knew. I didn't walk into that cell with wisdom in my eyes. I walked in with a mask on my face and chains on my mind. The transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a slow, painful shedding. A death and a rebirth. I didn't know it then, but I wasn't just serving time. I was walking toward purpose. In prison, everything is stripped away. Your freedom, your time, your illusions. All you have is space and silence. That silence became my teacher. That space became my battlefield. I saw the world more clearly from behind bars than I ever had while free. I saw how the system was built, not just to punish, but to erase. Erase your name, erase your memory, erase your history, erase your will. And if you let it, that cell will swallow you whole. But I wasn't ready to be swallowed. Not anymore. The day I picked up my first book was the day the old me began to die. I didn't know how to explain it at the time, but I could feel something inside me waking up. I began to see patterns, connections. I saw how our people were kept in darkness by design, how ignorance had become a tool of control. I saw that we were not born inferior. We were taught to feel that way. I saw that I had been tricked. We had all been tricked. And once you know you've been lied to, you start tearing through every lie until you find something real. The teachings of Elijah Muhammad reached me like a thunderclap. The idea that the black man was the original man, that our names had been stolen, that our minds had been poisoned, that we were more than what America told us we were. I studied his words like scripture. I memorized them. I internalized them. Not because I was looking for religion, but because I was looking for identity. I wasn't just reading. I was resurrecting. I was taking pieces of truth and building a new man out of the rubble of my old self. Detroit Red couldn't survive in that truth. He had to go. The con artist, the hustler, the street smart fool. He was a product of a lie, a tool of the same system that enslaved his ancestors. He lived off scraps of dignity and dressed it up in style and swagger. But he was empty, lost. That man couldn't carry the weight of truth. He couldn't fight for anything real. So I buried him in that prison cell and stepped into something greater. I took the name Malcolm X, not because it sounded powerful, but because it meant something. That X represented the unknown. It represented what had been taken, my African name, my true family lineage, my stolen legacy. That letter stood in for every root they ripped out of the ground, every history book they burned, every language they erased. It wasn't a name, it was a scar. And I wore it with pride. When I walked out of prison, I didn't walk out as a free man in the legal sense. I walked out as a free's mind. I walked out with fire in my eyes, with direction in my steps. I walked out knowing who I was and what I was meant to do. I wasn't going back to the streets. I wasn't chasing money or women or status. I was chasing truth. I was chasing justice. I was chasing the liberation of my people. I had been reborn, and that rebirth came with responsibility. That's what prison gave me, not punishment. It gave me the silence to hear the voice I had been drowning out for years, the voice of my ancestors, the voice of my conscience, the voice of truth. It gave me the time to prepare, to sharpen my mind, to build my body, to train my spirit. I walked into that place confused and came out with clarity. I walked in blind and came out with vision. I walked in as Malcolm Little and walked out as Malcolm X. People ask me how I changed so much in prison. I tell them the change didn't come from the walls or the bars. It came from within. It came from being willing to unlearn everything I thought I knew. From being humble enough to say, I don't know who I am, but I'm ready to find out. That's the hardest part, admitting you've been missiled, that your education, your religion, your entire worldview was given to you by people who never wanted you to be free. But once you admit that you can begin again, and that beginning can be more powerful than any ending. When I looked around in that prison, I saw men with brilliant minds wasting away, not because they were less intelligent than college students, but because no one had ever told them they were worthy of knowledge. No one had ever shown them that they were more than criminals. I realized that what happened to me could happen to them, that this transformation wasn't special. It was necessary. That if we could educate the black man, we could elevate the black nation. That if we could replace ignorance with purpose, the chains would fall without a fight. Malcolm X was not a mistake. He was not a miracle. He was the result of intention, discipline, and truth. He was the product of self-revolution. That name was not just mine. It was a symbol of possibility, a reminder that every brother behind bars, every sister in the struggle, every child taught to hate themselves could become something greater. Not because someone gave them permission, but because they claimed it for themselves. When I first went inside those prison walls, I was lost. I wasn't thinking about change or purpose. I was thinking about survival, about how to get by another day. But prison has a way of stripping everything away until all you have left is your mind. And that's where my transformation began. Inside that cage, I discovered the power of knowledge, the power of education, and the power of self-awareness. Before prison, I didn't care much for books. I was a hustler, a street, smart kid from the gutter who thought the world was a place to be fought over with fists and fast words. But the moment the gates shut behind me, I was forced to confront a truth I had been running from all my life, that I was ignorant. That ignorance was the greatest chain of all. The system that put me there wanted me to stay that way, uneducated, unaware, mentally shackled. So I made a choice. I chose to fight back, not with weapons, but with words. I picked up a dictionary first because I needed to know the meaning of every word I spoke, every idea I wanted to express. I copied the entire dictionary by hand, page after page, word after word, until those words became part of me. That might seem strange, but let me tell you, that was the beginning of my liberation. With language came understanding. I learned to read between the lines of history books, to see past the lies fed to us in school. I read about the greatness of Africa before the chains. I read about powerful empires, about civilizations that flourished long before the so-called discovery by Europe. I read about our ancestors, kings, warriors, scholars, people whose stories had been buried beneath the weight of white supremacy. I read about the brutal truth of slavery, not the sanitized version, but the raw, bloody reality, the pain, the suffering, the theft of identity. But I also read about resistance, about courage, about revolutions where men and women refused to accept their chains. I saw that knowledge was the key to understanding this history and understanding our present. Then I found the teachings of Elijah Muhammad. His words were like a light cutting through the darkness. He told me the black man was the original man, that our true history had been stolen from us, that the system was built on lies to keep us divided and weak. Those teachings gave me a framework to understand my life, my people, and the struggle we faced. I studied relentlessly. I memorized passages. I prayed. I disciplined myself. I changed my habits, what I ate, how I spoke, how I thought. I didn't just want to get out of prison. I wanted to get out as a new man, armed with knowledge and purpose. I realized that true freedom wasn't just physical, it was mental, spiritual, and emotional. Inside those prison walls, I was reborn. I shed the old skin of Detroit red, the hustler who lived for the streets. I embraced a new identity, a new mission. I became Malcolm X, not just a name, but a symbol of resistance and pride. That X stood for the lost name, the unknown heritage, the history stolen from black people. It was a reminder of the past and a declaration of the future. Books became my weapons. Education became my rebellion. I wasn't just reading for myself. I was preparing to teach, to lead, to fight for my people. The power of knowledge transformed me from a lost young man into a leader with a vision. I came to understand that if we wanted to break the cycle of oppression, we had to arm ourselves with truth. Prison gave me the time and space to discover this. The silence that so many feared became my greatest teacher. When the noise of the world was stripped away, I was left to confront myself, and in that confrontation I found strength. I learned that a man who knows himself cannot be controlled. I learned that the mind is the most powerful weapon we have. This transformation wasn't easy. It was a battle every day against old habits, old thoughts, and old fears. But I was determined. I knew that education was the path to liberation, not just for me, but for all black people. And that knowledge must be shared, must be spread, must be used to build a movement. When I left prison, I didn't just walk out as a free man. I walked out as a man on fire, with a mission to awaken my people. I wanted to teach them what I had learned in those walls, that knowledge is power, that our history is glorious, that our future depends on reclaiming our identity and standing strong. The journey from ignorance to enlightenment changed everything. It changed how I saw myself, how I saw my people, and how I saw the world. And it all started with the simple act of reading and learning behind those prison walls. That's how prison changed the course of my life. It forced me to become who I was meant to be.